Bachelor number 1, I am serving you for dinner.
Oh.
What are you called, and what do you look like?
I'm called the banana, and I look really good. Peel me.
Rodney Alcala often posed as a friendly photographer, luring women and girls by approaching them on the street and offering to take their picture. Then, he would take them to a secluded place and attack them. In 1968, a Good Samaritan witnessed Rodney driving off with a little girl. Concerned, he called the LAPD as he followed Rodney to an apartment. Former Los Angeles police officer Chris Camacho reached the location and knocked on the door. I said, "Police officer, open the door. I need to talk to you." This male appeared at the door. I will always remember that face at the door. Very evil face. And he says, I'm in the shower. I got to get dressed, and I told him, okay, you got 10 seconds. Finally, I kicked the door in. The image will be with me forever. We could see in the kitchen that there was a body on the floor. Lots of blood. Miraculously, Tally survived being essayed and beaten with a steel bar. She was in a coma for 32 days and spent months in recovery. Meanwhile, Rodney Alcala had slipped away. He traveled to the East Coast in 1971. He was included on the FBI's most wanted list. Rodney even made friends in New York. No one in his NYU film school suspected a thing, despite the fact that Rodney was living a horror movie. Rodney's crimes were graphic in nature. He would essay some of his victims, use a claw hammer, and in others he would repeatedly strangle his victims to unconsciousness, wait for them to regain consciousness, and then kill them. His very first victim was in 1971. Cornelia Tai was thrilled at being hired as a flight attendant. She had just moved into her very first apartment in Manhattan. But soon after moving in, on June 24th, 1971, she was strangled to death with her own stockings. Her murder went into the cold case file until 2010, when new DNA technology solved it with a saliva sample from the killer. Rodney therefore was not even a suspect. After the murder, he changed his name to John Berger and moved to New Hampshire. He landed a job as a counselor at an arts and drama camp for girls. While at the camp, some recognized him as Rodney Alcala. They told the camp's dean, and Alcala was soon arrested. However, he was able to plead to a lesser charge of child molestation and served just 34 months. And shockingly, right after this, in September 1977, he managed to land a job with the Los Angeles Times as a typesetter, despite being a registered sex offender. His next victim was a 23-year-old musician and artist named Ellen Hover. Ellen Hover had marked on her calendar that she was going to see someone named John Berger on the date that she disappeared. Remember, Rodney had changed his name, so the connection hadn't been made yet. Unfortunately, Ellen's body was found a year later, badly decomposed. Police had to use dental records to identify her. Mary Ellen O'Toole, a former FBI profiler, said he was constantly in predatory mode. That is, behavior that involves hunting human beings, and that's part of a serial sexual killer. That is often as exciting as actual homicide and sexual assault. His third known murder victim was discovered on November 10th, 1977. She was 18-year-old Jill Bearcombs, whose body was discovered along a dirt pathway near Mulholland Drive in Los Angeles. She was naked from the waist down. He had posed her body before leaving her there. There was evidence of SA, and she had been beaten and strangled with a pair of blue slacks. Additionally, she had 3 bite marks on her right breast. His fourth victim was 27-year-old Georgia Wickstead, whose body was discovered on December 16, 1977 in Malibu. She had been bludgeoned before being strangled. Her body was found on the floor near her bed. Now this is absolutely shocking and disturbing. His past convictions for SA prompted California police to interview him in March 1978 as a potential suspect in the Hillside Strangler killings. But he was cleared of those crimes, and police didn't realize at the time they had actually spoken with a different serial killer. Sadly, he went on to kill, and his fifth victim was 32-year-old Charlotte Lamb, who was murdered on June 24, 1978. She was found in a laundry room of a large apartment complex in California. Her body was found face up, naked, with her hands behind her back. She had been essayed and strangled with a shoelace. Strangely, on September 13, 1978, Rodney Alcala appeared on an episode of The Dating Game. He was introduced as Bachelor Number 1 and was described as a successful photographer. Though no one was aware yet, by this time, Rodney had killed 5 women. And I assure you, his answers on the show will creep you out.
Bachelor Number 1.
Yes.
What's your best time?
The best time is at nighttime,
Why do you say that?
because that's the only time there is.
The only time? What's wrong with morning, afternoon?
Well, they're okay, but nighttime's when it really gets good.
And sadly, Rodney was so charismatic that he ended up winning the show. Fortunately, Cheryl Bradshaw had this gut feeling that something was off. She ended up calling the Dating Games show contestant coordinator the next day to say she changed her mind about meeting Rodney because she was creeped out by him. She said, "Ellen, I can't go out with this guy. There's weird vibes that are coming off of him. He's very strange. I am not comfortable. Is that going to be a problem?" And of course I said, "No," said Metzger. It is no surprise he had creeped out other contestants as well. Bachelor number 2, Jed Mills, remembered Rodney as, quote, "a little creepy." In the green room, he jumps in and says, "I always get my girl." I immediately did not like this guy. So how did he end up on the show? Well, production team Mike and Ellen Metzger disagreed about casting him at first. Mind you, this was at a time where background checks were difficult. Ellen thought the man was attractive and charming, but Mike recalled something was off about him. Quote, "He had a mystique about him that I found uncomfortable." Ultimately, Rodney made the cut. While his answers on the show weren't out of the ordinary for contestants, it is chilling in retrospect. His next victim was 21-year-old Jill Parento, whose body was discovered on June 14, 1979. Rodney had broken into her Burbank apartment and beat her, and then strangled her to death. He then posed her body inside her apartment bedroom, propping it up with pillows. His 7th and final known, I repeat known victim, was 12-year-old Robin Samso, who was murdered on June 20th, 1979. She had been abducted by Rodney as she rode a bicycle from her Huntington Beach neighborhood to ballet practice. Her body was found decomposing, dumped off of Santa Anita Canyon Road around 12 days later. On June 24, 1979, Rodney Alcala was arrested for the murder of Robin Samso. He had been reported to authorities after his parole officer noticed that a police sketch of the suspect looked similar to Alcala. He would later be convicted of this murder and then linked to other deaths due to DNA evidence. Police found many of Alcala's photos and do not know how many, if any, other victims are pictured in the collection. They released hundreds to the public in hopes to identify them. Rodney Alcala was sentenced to death in Orange County in 1980 for the 1979 kidnapping and murder of 12-year-old Robin Samso. In 1984, the California Supreme Court granted Rodney a new trial because they felt the jury was being prejudiced, learning of Alcala's past sex crimes. In 1986, Alcala was sentenced to death a second time for Samso's murder. However, a federal appeals court in 2003 overturned this because the second trial judge did not allow a witness to back up the defense's claim that the park ranger who found Robin Samso's body in the mountains had been hypnotized by police investigators. Now Rodney was given a new trial, and he announced to much surprise that he would be his own lawyer in his third trial. His DNA matched evidence in other murders, and Orange County prosecutors indicated Rodney Alcala for the murder of 4 women. So in 2010, an Orange County jury convicted Rodney Alcala of 5 counts of first-degree murder, and he was sentenced to death. In 2012, Rodney was extradited to New York after he was indicted for the 1971 murder of Cornelia Criley and the 1977 murder of Ellen Jane Hover. He pleaded guilty to those murders, and in 2013, he was sentenced in New York to 25 years to life. In 2016, in Wyoming, he was charged with the murder of Christine Ruth Thornton, 28, who disappeared in 1978 and whose body was found in 1982. Sadly, she was 6 months pregnant at the time of the murder. On July 24, 2021, while sitting on death row in California, Rodney Alcala died of natural causes at age 77. It is suspected that Rodney killed over 100 women and girls. Tally, who I mentioned in the beginning, survived. She said Quote, "The planet is a better place without him, that's for sure. It's a long time coming, but he's got his karma." Thank you so much for watching, and for now, take care and stay safe.